Have you ever wondered what happens when two completely different worlds collide? A world of limitless wealth and a world of pure simplicity. Tonight, we begin with a man who owns everything money can buy. Mansions, private jets, and cars worth more than entire villages. He is powerful, respected, and used to solving problems with one call. But on a lonely African roadside, his fortune meant nothing. One small puncture left him stranded. And then came a boy, a poor farmer's son, barefoot, dusty, carrying nothing but honesty and a kind heart. Two lives, so different, about to cross paths in the most unexpected way. In this video, you will discover how a single act of kindness turned arrogance into humility and changed the life of a billionaire forever. You'll learn why true wealth isn't always counted in money, and why sometimes the poorest are the richest in values. So, stay with us till the very end, because this story is not just about a broken car, it's about breaking pride, and about the hidden lessons life teaches in the simplest of moments. Welcome to Pure African Tales, where every story carries a soul. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and join our growing family. Now, let's begin. And in the heart of the city, where glass towers touched the sky, there lived a man whose name carried weight in every boardroom. He was a billionaire, one of those men who seemed untouchable, untiring, and always one step ahead of everyone else. His days began before sunrise, not with roosters or the sound of workers in the fields, but with the ringing of telephones, assistants rushing into his office, and reports stacked high on polished desks. And everywhere he went, doors opened before he even reached them. Luxury followed him like a shadow. From the leather seats of his private jet to the marble floors of his mansion, his life was built on comfort, power, and respect. People bowed their heads when he spoke, not out of love, but out of fear or admiration for his fortune. And the world he lived in was fast, too fast. Meetings bled into dinners, and dinners into late-night calls that shaped the economy of nations. For him, time was money, and money was everything. Every decision was measured in profits, every friendship in benefits, and every opportunity in numbers on a screen. And yet, with all that power, there was something he lacked. He had grown so used to being in control that he could not imagine life without authority. He moved through life like a man who believed the world revolved around him. If he needed something, he bought it. If he wanted someone, he hired them. Problems to him were not obstacles. They were transactions, solvable with enough cash. And ordinary people? To him, they were almost invisible. The farmer, the driver, the street vendor. He passed them every day, but never noticed their faces. Their lives were too far from his world, too small to matter. His eyes were fixed only on deals, signatures, and bank balances, and pride was his crown. He wore it in every conversation, in the way he carried himself, in the silence he expected when he entered a room. He believed money was the ultimate solution, the universal key that could unlock any door. If power was fire, then wealth was the fuel he poured without hesitation. And deep inside, he thought he had mastered life, that nothing could humble him, that no situation could place him lower than the people he rarely acknowledged. His empire was his fortress, and he believed it would never crumble. And so, as he drove down the highway that day in one of his finest cars, a machine worth more than the fields of an entire village, he felt untouchable. He believed he was in full command of every detail around him. The world belonged to him. Or so he thought. And not too far from the shining towers of the city, in a small village surrounded by fields and dust, lived a boy who owned almost nothing. His house was made of mud and straw, his clothes worn thin from too many seasons, and his shoes were long gone. His feet had grown used to the soil, the stones, and the heat of the earth. He had no riches, no luxuries, and yet every morning he woke with purpose. And before the sun rose, when the air was still cool and the birds had not yet begun their songs, the boy would already be awake. He would fetch water in rusty tins, carry bundles of firewood on his back, and feed the animals his family kept. His hands were small, but they were rough and strong from work. Work that never ended. And when the sun climbed higher, he would walk to the fields with his father, or sometimes alone. The land was dry, the soil cracked, and yet they worked with patience, planting seeds, hoping for rain. Each grain of harvest meant food on their plates, survival for another day. He did not dream of cars or mansions. His dreams were simpler: a full meal, a better roof, and even though a school book without missing pages, he carried no bitterness in his heart. He laughed with his younger siblings, shared what little food he had, and helped neighbors without expecting anything in return. Hunger had visited his home many times, but greed had never entered his heart. And his world was made of small joys: the smell of wet soil after rain, the laughter of goats running through the field, the warmth of sitting by a fire at night with his family. He did not know the taste of luxury, but he knew the sweetness of gratitude. And when he saw others in need, his first instinct was always to give, even if it meant he went without. A piece of bread, a helping hand, or simply a smile. His family had taught him that wealth was not measured in coins, but in kindness. That generosity was the only treasure no one could steal. And though he owned nothing that the world considered valuable, he carried something far rarer: a heart uncorrupted by greed, a spirit unbroken by hardship, and an innocence that even poverty could not erase. And so, while the billionaire sped down highways in polished cars, the boy walked barefoot along dusty paths, carrying hope like a hidden jewel in his chest. He was poor in possessions, but rich in values. His world was small, but his heart was vast. And it was on one ordinary day, while tending to his usual chores, that his path would soon cross with a man who had everything, yet nothing at all. And the road stretched endlessly, a ribbon of hot tar cutting through the empty land. The billionaire sat behind the wheel of his gleaming car, the engine humming like a beast, the leather seats cool against his back. He had just left an important meeting, his mind filled with numbers, deals, and deadlines. To him, this was just another journey, another piece of time between one success and the next. And then, without warning, a sound shattered the rhythm of the ride. A sharp hiss, a wobble beneath the tires. The car trembled, pulled to the side and slowed. He tightened his grip on the wheel, his brows furrowed. The vehicle rolled to a halt at the edge of the lonely road. Silence fell, and he stepped broken only by the faint polished shoes touching the dusty ground. The sight hit him instantly. A flat tire, rubber torn, useless on the rim. A car worth more than a village brought down by a single nail, a single puncture. His jaw tightened. His pride stung. He was a man of power, yet here he was, stranded by the smallest of problems, and frustration rose like fire in his chest. He reached for his phone. No signal. He searched the road in both directions. Nothing but heat, dust, and emptiness. No staff, no drivers, no bodyguards rushing to his aid. For the first time in years, he was alone, powerless, with no one to order, no one to command. And he kicked the tire in anger, muttering words under his breath. How could something so trivial delay a man of his stature? His schedule was tight, his time priceless. Every minute lost here felt like an insult to his authority. He was used to snapping his fingers and having problems vanish. But this was a problem that refused to move. And as he stood there, Sweat beading on his forehead under the burning sun, his confidence began to crack. He opened the trunk, searching for tools, but his hands were untrained. The billionaire knew how to sign contracts worth millions, but not how to change a tire. His wealth could buy him everything, except the knowledge he needed in that moment. And the minutes dragged on. Cars were rare on this forgotten road. He stared into the horizon, hoping for headlights, praying for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. Just silence, just emptiness, just the mocking sight of a broken car and a man who had built his empire on control, now losing it all to a piece of punctured rubber. And the anger turned to restlessness. He paced the roadside, checking his watch again and again. Each tick of the clock was another reminder that his power meant nothing here. He was a king without a kingdom, stranded in a desert of helplessness. And yet, somewhere beyond the fields, a pair of eyes had noticed him. A boy, small in stature but large in spirit, was walking closer. The billionaire did not know it yet, but his day, and his life, was about to change in ways he could never imagine. And from a distance, the boy noticed the gleaming machine stranded on the roadside. It was unlike anything he had ever seen up close. Shiny metal, tinted windows, tires bigger than the baskets he carried from the fields. The car looked out of place in this land of dust and silence, like a jewel fallen into the mud. And he saw the man beside it, tall, dressed in clothes finer than anyone in his village could ever afford. The boy hesitated for a moment, but kindness pulled him forward. Step by step, barefoot on the rough ground, he made his way toward the frustrated stranger. And the billionaire spotted him coming. His eyes narrowed. A poor farmer's boy, thin, covered in dust, clothes torn from work in the fields. The billionaire let out a silent sigh. What could a boy like that possibly offer? To him, this was just another interruption, another delay. And the boy, unfazed by the man's sharp gaze, stopped a few feet away. His voice was calm, respectful, but filled with quiet confidence. "Sir," he said, "it looks like your tire is broken. Do you need help?" His words carried no fear, no greed, just simple honesty. And the billionaire almost laughed. Help? From this child? A boy with no shoes, no tools, no status? He waved his hand dismissively, certain the boy had no idea what he was looking at. In his mind, problems were solved by professionals, by men with skills and machines, not by poor children from the roadside. And yet, the boy did not step back. He repeated softly, "I can fix it. I've done it many times before." His tone was steady, not boasting, not begging, just truth, spoken like water flowing over stone. And for a moment, the billionaire felt the sting of pride. He wanted to refuse, to tell the boy to go back to his fields. But time was running, and no one else had appeared. He stared at the flat tire, then back at the boy. A part of him wrestled inside, disbelief on one side, desperation on the other. And finally, with a reluctant nod, he said, "Fine. Show me what you can do." His words were sharp, his face stern, but behind his eyes there was a flicker of curiosity. Could this boy really solve what had brought a billionaire to a standstill? And the boy smiled gently, not triumphantly, but with the quiet assurance of someone who knew his place in the world, yet also knew the strength of his own hands. He stepped closer to the luxury car, unafraid of its shine, ready to prove that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Watching closely, doubt still heavy in his heart, the boy bent down to begin. Two worlds had finally met, one of gold and power, the other of dust and humility. Neither of them knew it yet, but this simple encounter would ripple far beyond a roadside puncture. And the boy knelt beside the great machine, his small hands brushing away the dust, that clung to the wheel. He carried no fancy tools, no shining box of equipment. Instead, he reached into the cloth bag slung across his shoulder. From it, he pulled out a few worn tools, patched together with wire and wood. They were simple, almost primitive, compared to the car's polished steel. But in his hands, they were enough. And the billionaire watched silently, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. He had expected clumsiness, hesitation, even failure. But the boy moved with a calm rhythm, as though he had done this 100 times before. His fingers were steady, his motions precise, his breath measured. And first, the boy loosened the bolts, straining with all his small strength. The metal resisted, but he did not give up. He leaned his whole weight, his muscles taut, his brow damp with sweat. Slowly, the bolts gave way. His face lit up with quiet determination, not pride, just the satisfaction of steady work. And the wheel came off, rolling gently to the side. The boy examined the torn rubber with careful eyes, tracing the hole with his finger. He had no brand new replacement, no glossy spare, but he knew how to mend. Years of patching carts, bicycles, and wagons had taught him the art of fixing what others would throw away. And he worked patiently, patching the puncture with scraps of rubber he carried, sealing it with a small piece of heated metal he had shaped from the village fire. The process was slow, but his hands never trembled. Every move carried respect for the task, for the man watching, and for himself. And the billionaire stood still, his thoughts tangled. He had spent millions on cars, yet never once had he touched a tire. He had hired the best mechanics, flown experts across continents, but here, on a dusty roadside, a barefoot boy was solving the problem with nothing but scraps and determination. And time seemed to slow as the boy finished his repair. He lifted the patched wheel with effort, sliding it back into place. His arms shook with the weight, but he refused to stop. He tightened the bolts again, one by one, making sure each was firm, making sure the car would stand strong once more. And when he was done, he wiped his hands on his faded shirt, leaving smudges of black against the worn fabric. He looked up at the billionaire, not for praise, not for reward, but simply to say, "It's ready now." His voice was steady, humble, carrying no pride, only service. And for a long moment, the billionaire said nothing. He stared at the car, then at the boy, and back again. He had expected weakness, but saw strength. He had expected incompetence, but saw skill. He had expected greed, but found humility. His silence was not disdain anymore. It was surprise, mixed with something unfamiliar. Respect. And the car, once useless, now stood whole again, ready to continue its journey. All because a boy with nothing had given everything he had. His time, his effort, his heart. And the car stood ready again, its tire firm, its weight steady on the ground. The boy stepped back, brushing the dust from his palms, breathing heavily but with quiet satisfaction. For him, the work was done. There was no expectation in his eyes, no hidden demand, only the calm relief of having solved a problem for someone in need. And the billionaire reached into his pocket. His fingers touched the crisp edges of folded bills, each note worth more than the boy had likely seen in months. He pulled them out slowly, the paper gleaming in the sunlight, a small fortune by the standards of the village. He stretched out his hand, his voice stern but softened by the moment. "Take this. You've earned it." And the boy looked at the money, his eyes steady, his face unreadable. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Any other man might have snatched it instantly, grateful for the sudden wealth. But the boy did not move. He shook his head gently, his voice firm yet kind. "I don't want it. I only wanted to help." And the billionaire froze. His hand hung in the air, the bills fluttering slightly in the breeze. He blinked, almost certain he had misheard. Who refuses money? Who turns down a reward from a billionaire? Yet the boy stood there, unwavering, as though the very idea of payment was an insult to the kindness he had offered. And he spoke again, simple words that cut deeper than gold. If someone is in trouble, you help them, not because of money, but because it's the right thing to do. His tone was calm, but his conviction was unshakable. Like stone carved by years of hardship and humility, the billionaire felt small. This boy, poor and barefoot, had given him something no transaction ever had: genuine humanity without a price tag. The billionaire lowered his hand slowly, the money still clutched in his fingers, but useless in that moment. And a strange silence followed. The wind rustled through the fields. A bird called faintly in the distance, but neither of them spoke. The man of riches stared at the boy of dust, and in that stare he saw something he had forgotten existed: integrity untouched by greed, kindness unbought by wealth. And his chest tightened with an unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't anger, it wasn't pride. It was something deeper, something uncomfortable, something that made him question himself. How many times had he used money to buy loyalty, to buy silence, to buy service? And here was a child, teaching him without knowing it, that the most valuable things in life could never be purchased. And the billionaire finally nodded, saying nothing more. He slipped the money back into his pocket, but the weight of it now felt heavier than ever. For the boy had refused riches, yet in that refusal, he had given the billionaire something far greater: a glimpse of truth. And as the boy turned to leave, walking back toward his simple village, the man stood by his shining car, watching in silence. The image of that refusal burned into his memory, echoing louder than any business deal, louder than any applause. And the engine roared back to life, the luxury car gliding once more along the endless road. The billionaire sat behind the wheel, his eyes on the horizon, but his mind was far from the journey. The boy's words echoed in his ears, circling again and again like a voice he could not silence. And no matter how fast he drove, he could not escape the question: why would someone with so little refuse money? It made no sense to him. All his life, he had believed wealth was the answer to every problem, the solution to every obstacle. Yet that barefoot boy had shown him otherwise, not through argument, but through action. And the thought unsettled him. He tapped the steering wheel, his usual confidence gone. The boy had nothing. No fine clothes, no car, no servants. His home was likely smaller than the billionaire's garage. Yet when offered money, he had stood tall and said no. That single word carried more power than all the contracts the billionaire had ever signed. And the man asked himself, what is true wealth? Was it the gold watch on his wrist, ticking silently? Was it the mansion waiting for him at the top of the hill? Or was it something invisible, something the boy carried inside his heart? And suddenly, his riches felt strange. The leather seat beneath him, the polished glass dashboard, the engine's purr. They no longer felt like triumph. They felt hollow, like ornaments without meaning. For what use was wealth if it could not buy the honesty of a child, the kindness of a stranger? And memory after memory flooded him. He thought of the countless men who had bowed before him, not out of love, but out of greed for what he could offer. He thought of the friends who stayed close, not because of loyalty, but because of the gifts he provided. Every relationship, every bond, seemed built on transactions. Except for one, the bond he had just witnessed, pure and unpaid. And the silence of the road grew heavy. He could almost hear the boy's words again, not because of money, but because it's the right thing to do. Those words carved into him, sharper than any insult, deeper than any praise. And for the first time, he wondered if he had been poor all along. Poor not in currency, but in spirit. Poor in values that no treasure could buy. Perhaps true wealth was not the size of one's bank account, but the size of one's heart. Perhaps richness was measured not in possessions, but in principles. And his chest tightened with a mix of shame and awakening. He had always believed himself untouchable, yet here he was, shaken by a boy who owned nothing. A boy who had unknowingly shown him that pride can be pierced, that arrogance can be silenced, and that humility can teach lessons more valuable than gold. And the road stretched on. But the billionaire no longer felt like the same man who had started the journey. Something inside him was shifting, slowly, silently, like a door unlocking in the deepest part of his soul. And days passed, but the boy never left the billionaire's thoughts. In the boardroom, while men argued over numbers, he heard the boy's steady voice. At grand dinners, where laughter echoed over golden plates, he saw the boy's dusty feet, walking calmly along the roadside. No matter where he went, the memory followed him. One morning, sharp, unable to rest any longer, the billionaire made a decision. He ordered his driver to take him not to the city, not to his office, but back to that lonely stretch of road. From there, he asked villagers until he was led to a small settlement, hidden between fields of dry crops and scattered huts. And when he arrived, he saw a world far from his own. Children played barefoot, chasing old tires down the path. Women carried heavy buckets of water on their heads. Men worked under the harsh sun, their hands rough, their backs bent with labor. And among them, he spotted the boy, smiling as he shared a piece of fruit with his younger sister. And the billionaire felt a strange warmth in his chest. Here was the boy who had refused money, living with so little, yet carrying himself with dignity and joy. No polished suits, no wealth, no servants, just a simple life built on kindness. And he watched quietly as the boy worked. He fetched water without complaint, mended tools for his father, comforted his crying sibling with patience. Each small act spoke louder than words. The billionaire realized the boy's refusal of money had not been a moment of pride. It was who he was, a soul untouched by greed. And the billionaire approached him at last. The villagers looked on in awe, for never before had such a man stepped into their world. He called the boy over, and with a softened voice he said, "You helped me when I was helpless. Now I want to help you." And he saw confusion in the boy's eyes. Help? From him? The boy shook his head gently, as if to say he wanted nothing in return. But the billionaire continued. Not money, not payment, opportunity, education, a chance to carry your kindness into the wider world. And the boy's father stood nearby, humbled, uncertain. The offer was more than they could have dreamed of. School, books, a future beyond the fields. Yet the billionaire spoke carefully, making sure the boy understood. He did not want to change him, only to support the goodness already within him. And the boy, after a long silence, nodded slowly. Not out of greed, but out of trust. His acceptance was quiet, humble, but it carried the weight of a new beginning. And from that day, a bond was formed. Not between master and servant, not between rich and poor, but between two souls who had met on the roadside of fate. The billionaire saw in the boy a teacher, and the boy saw in the billionaire not just wealth, but a man willing to learn. And so, on a quiet roadside, a story was written that no amount of wealth could buy. A billionaire learned that riches may open doors, but kindness opens hearts. He discovered that true strength does not come from money, but from humility, from compassion, from the courage to help without expecting anything in return. And sometimes, those who own the least in this world carry the greatest treasures. The farmer boy had no gold, no fine clothes, no mansion. Yet his values were richer than diamonds, his honesty brighter than silver. He gave without taking, he helped without asking. And in doing so, he transformed not just a car, but a man's entire way of seeing life. And perhaps this is the truth we all must face, that wealth does not define character. Money may build towers, but it cannot build respect. Riches may buy comfort, but they cannot buy kindness. The poorest in possessions are often the richest in spirit, carrying values the world desperately needs. And so the question comes to you, dear listener. In your own life, what do you value more? Riches or humanity? Which legacy would you rather leave behind? The weight of gold or the warmth of kindness? If this story touched your heart, let it not end here. Carry its lesson forward. Share kindness where you can, and remember that one simple act may change someone's life forever. Welcome again to Pure African Tales, where stories speak to the soul. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of wisdom, humanity, and hope from the heart of Africa to the world.